Have you ever met a deaf person? If you did, would you assume that deaf person is disabled? Would you assume a deaf person is illiterate or perhaps less intelligent because they cannot hear? Would you also think that a cochlear implant, essentially an artificial inner ear, is a cure to deafness? Most hearing people have never met a deaf person, and therefore they would believe anything they may hear about them. Before we get into this debate over cochlear implants, it is important to have a base knowledge of deaf culture. Throughout the history of humanity, deaf people have established communities, developed sign languages, challenged boundaries and expectations, and have an overall culture that is undeniably unique and precious. The deaf community includes those who are deaf or hard of hearing throughout the hearing loss spectrum. They largely value their deafness. They in fact do not see it as a disability, but instead a difference in language, and have a very close-knit community that communicates through sign language. Think about it as their first language. Their native language is sign language. Contrary to the typical belief that deaf people are illiterate, as long as they are given access to language, they can read, they can drive, they can go to school and become doctors, professors, technicians, chefs, musicians, you name it. Deaf people can do anything hearing people can do, except hear. American Sign Language, or ASL, is a complex visual language with its own grammar and slang, and not just signed English. I am a hearing person learning basic ASL, but here's an example of what ASL might look like. In the United States, at least 85% of individuals with profound deafness marry another deaf person. I think this statistic really showcases how tight-knit this community is, and how important it is to have that shared language and find connection, when they would normally feel excluded and out of the loop in the hearing world. Some people with severe to profound hearing loss have the option to receive a cochlear implant. How do cochlear implants work? A cochlear implant is a small electronic device that helps people who are profoundly deaf or severely hard of hearing to hear sounds. It has an external microphone behind the ear that picks up sounds, which are then coded and digitized to be processed by the tiny artificial nerve fibers implanted in the cochlea. While a cochlear implant doesn't restore natural hearing, modern ones provide a pretty accurate imitation of sound. You can imagine the sound quality is often robotic or muffled though, and this makes it extremely difficult to interpret speech, especially for children who have never learned spoken language and can't compare it to natural hearing. Here's a clip of what hearing with a cochlear implant might sound like.
More like you're talking over a wall is what it sounds like.
Or like you're, if you were closing your mouth and it's muffled.
Mm-hmm.
The sun is finally shining. The sun is finally shining.
Maybe try one
more. Like, did that sound closer, you think?
Yeah.
Okay.
The sun is finally shining.
That's it. Wow.
Let me play them back and forth a couple times.
The sun is finally shining. The sun is finally
cool.
shining.
It is essential to note that not everyone with hearing loss is a suitable candidate for cochlear implants. It's estimated that approximately 10 to 15% of the total deaf or hard of hearing population may be eligible candidates for cochlear implants. Even then, some people who have received cochlear implants will often opt to sign instead of learning oral language. Cochlear implants at first are sensory overwhelming and take years of training for someone to be able to comprehend speech with them. You may have seen these types of videos, deaf babies hearing for the first time, emotional and happy. This is an example of inspiration porn, and spreads the misinformation that deafness is always something to be cured. For some people, yes, cochlear implants can be a miraculous technology, but many others do not have that option or struggle with using them. Hearing is not always attainable or desirable for everyone. The most important thing is that children have exposure and access to language, sign language included. What do proud, culturally deaf people think of cochlear implants? Well, as I hinted at earlier, many deaf individuals are not fans of implantation. Some deaf people value and love their implants, but the main reason other deaf people dislike cochlear implantation is because it can actually result in language deprivation and separation from deaf culture. Imagine a prelingual, very young child is given a cochlear implant. He will be expected to learn to hear and speak, and not be given access to sign language. This not only isolates that child from finding support within the deaf signing community, but its slow progress with speech comprehension using the cochlear implants can result in language deprivation. this is irreversible. Cochlear implantation can dissuade someone from learning sign language, and if they are treated as hearing, even though they still only have limited hearing, this results in language deprivation. With more and more parents of deaf children choosing to give their child cochlear implants in future years, deaf culture is at risk of dying out. To be deaf is to have a sensory difference. It only becomes a disability when the educational system fails the child and family. This is where the misinformation that deaf people are illiterate or have a lower IQ may come from. It's not because deaf equals dumb, but because mainstream education has failed them. For many years in the US, from 1880 to the 1960s, the practice of oralism was encouraged. This would mean that in schools for the deaf, they would restrict the use of signs and force them to learn to read lips and speak. It was an attempt at preparing deaf children for the hearing world, but many students did not do well in these schools, resulting in populations of deaf people that were not given a proper education and deprived of language development. Nowadays, there is a recognition that just one mode of communication does not serve the needs of deaf people in a hearing society. Individualized education plans with combinations of sign language and oral practice is often used for the best results. It has been estimated that by the year 2100, 90% of the world's current languages will be dead languages. This statistic includes ASL and other sign language, resulting in a future without deaf culture. So this moral dilemma has arisen over the possible loss of deaf culture in favor of a scientifically advanced world where no one needs to be deaf. The moral dilemma extends to other languages with this question of, is the death of thousands of minority languages worth it to have a modernized, universally connected world? For some people this seems like a good advancement, but when considering cultural identity and a history that pairs with these languages, it's a scary and terrible loss of culture. Now that you've been educated about deaf culture, I encourage you to understand their dilemma. And if you are interested, I highly encourage taking an ASL class to truly experience more of their visually expressive community. The hearing impaired community is a community that deserves to be heard. If you have any questions, please feel free to comment or reach out to me. Thank you for watching.